every few months, Timothy comes on and he gives us a preview of the next version of WordPress. You can catch them all. They're all on YouTube and they're all awesome. And tonight he's going to give us an overview of WordPress 5.8, which is due out next week. So here's
Not
Timothy.
next week, next month.
I'm sorry, next month. Next month.
Steve is single-handedly advancing the release date for WordPress. It is now coming out tomorrow by decree. Let me get my screen up. But yeah, so like Steve said, the next version of WordPress, WordPress 5.8, is coming up in July. Beta 2 actually got posted just a couple of hours ago. So I'm going to make my pitch. Now is the best time to try out WordPress 5.8. As always, with every release, I would not recommend putting this on your production site, but pretty much all hosts nowadays let you make staging sites and things like that. So now is a really great time because if you report a bug now, it can get fixed before WordPress 5.8 is released to the world next month. If you want to do that, you're going to need to go ahead to your plugin section and add new, and you'll want to search for the beta testing plugin. And you'll see an entry here for WordPress beta tester. You can install and activate it. And when you do, you get a new section in the tools menu that says beta testing. And so what you want to do is it'll be defaulted to point and release, but you want to change it to bleeding edge. And then I would recommend selecting beta or RC only. You hit save changes, you go to your dashboard, go to your update screen, and you'll get a prompt to update. It might say like update to WordPress 5.8 or the 5.8 nightly or something like that. But you'll get 5.8 beta 2, which is what I'm running today. And again, I would test this test this on a staging site. Don't test it on live yet. It's not ready for that. But yeah, so I'm going to go over a couple of things. There are two things I want to talk about before we get into the Gutenberg stuff. One is WordPress is dropping support for Internet Explorer 11, IE 11, in this release. This is kind of like a first step in this. If you're using IE 11, WordPress isn't suddenly going to say, okay, you can't use WordPress anymore, nothing's going to work in the admin or anything like that. But what it means is that new features aren't going to be tested with IE 11, and there are some things that are going to be, just won't be functional if you're using IE 11. But it means bugs aren't going to be fixed if they crop up, things like that. So if you have clients that are still needing IE 11, encourage them to upgrade to Edge, things like that. But you'll start seeing more major impacts of this in 5.9 later this year. But for now, just be aware that this is coming. And something to go over with your clients if they do expect that legacy browser support. Another new thing is adding to WordPress 5.8 is WebP. So you can now upload WebP images to your WordPress install. The important thing about this is that it's much better for file size. Things are much smaller. It's supported pretty much anywhere. And WordPress will let you essentially upload WebP images right now if you use WordPress 5.8. It depends a little bit on what your server supports. I would expect that most servers and most hosting companies will support this out of the box. If you are not seeing it, there's going to be a new information in Site Health that tells you a little bit about what parts are supported and what parts aren't supported, and you can talk to your host if you're not able to use WebP images. But with that, that's pretty much it for non-editor changes and things like that. I'm going to dive into editor stuff. So I've created a couple of pages here. Let's start off with just some general changes to the editor. What you'll see, I think this is a really neat feature, is there's a new and expanded list view. So we've had like a way to see if you were selected in a block, you could see the hierarchy through a little list view like thing. But it was pretty limited. It was only specific to the block that you had. Now in list view, it's this panel that you can open. You can jump to different blocks at any time. It's always available. This is really great with more complex layouts. So for example, I'm going to come over, let's see. here, this more complex page. And you can see how it's much more clear now what's going on with all these different blocks and how they nest. So I can jump over here to this column block or jump to the featured image or just jump around. It'll show me what's highlighted, what I'm currently editing, all that kind of stuff. Another change is to the top toolbar. I love the top toolbar mode for WordPress. What it does is instead of having a toolbar right above where your current block is, so this is what you'll get out of the default, out of the box, excuse me, with WordPress, you can enable, whoopsies, you can enable top toolbar mode and it will move all the controls up here. What it used to do is it would throw them into the main menu here if you had enough real estate, which could be a little bit confusing. Now all those controls appear in a secondary menu that is always present. It makes it work the same across all devices and all screen sizes, things like that. Where is this one? Okay. So getting into new features. Probably one of the most impactful new features visually that you'll see is the new duotone support. So if you select an image block or a cover block, you'll get this new control that looks like this circle here. And with that, you can apply a duotone filter. And what that does is it replaces the shadows in your images and the highlights in your images with specific colors. So you can get pretty wild looking effects. The way this works is it uses CSS filters. So this isn't actually destroying and recreating my image or making any permanent changes to this image. This is just all happening on the browser in the fly. And you can, of course, pick whatever custom colors you want, or you can use ones that your theme suggests out of the box, things like that. Again, like pretty much all these things, if you want to, for clients, you can disable this feature. But it adds some really nice effects, I think, to your images. And like I said, that's also available for cover blocks. Another new feature is with the columns block. So let's add in a columns pattern. So what we now get support for is for defining a color and a background color and padding on an individual column basis. So you can see this is saying, let's use some dark text and a white background for all of these things here. But let's say I wanted to make this current shows link in this column a different color. I can select that column block and I can go into color here and then I can just assign it a different background color. Let's say green. And I can add padding to it so it doesn't look so bad. Do something like that. And maybe we want to change the text to be a slightly different, instead of this black, this dark gray or something like that. That's unreadable. But yeah, so I can now make those changes on a per column basis. Whereas before you would have to do it and apply it to the full columns block. And now you can do it on a per column basis. Another change is to the table block where we have similar controls. You can now select a text color and a background color for your table block. And this doesn't completely work with 2021. If you test it, you'll see it's unreadable. This should be fixed by the time WordPress 5.8 comes out with changes to 2021. But there's just some CSS conflicts going on. So if you are testing, it might not work with your theme out of the box, depending on how they've set up like their CSS and things like that. But rest assured, it is a feature. And this should be getting fixed for 2021 before WordPress 5.8 releases. Another new feature we have is the ability to embed PDFs. So you could always upload a file block, and you still can. But what WordPress will now do is if it detects that you've uploaded a PDF, it'll automatically include an embedded version of that PDF in your post. So if we go over to the front end, we can see what that looks like. They can see that whole PDF in your editor. If you want, you can disable this, of course. Let's go over to the block. We can just disable showing the inline embed if you don't want that. But it's a pretty cool feature. It does depend on your browser supporting it. I think pretty much everything but Safari supports it, if I'm not mistaken. And when a browser doesn't support it, it'll just hide it, of course, and they'll have that download button, the file link, and things like that. But it's a really cool enhancement for browsers that do support it. There have been a couple of changes to reusable blocks, to the flow that goes to creating them. Let's say this is something that I include maybe as an offer on all my posts. So I want to have a quick way to insert it everywhere. We can go ahead and create this as a reusable block. And now WordPress will pop this up in a modal and kind of make the flow a little bit more obvious as to what's happening. Beginner's guide. And then the same stuff happens as normal. Another change, I believe, is that now you can rename this from here, where I think you had to go through some weird contusions to do that before. But just some minor enhancement to the reusable blocks flow. The next thing I want to talk about is probably what I think is going to be the most impactful part of the changes here, is we have a brand new widgets editor in WordPress. You'll see this is completely different from before. And what we have here is we have a block-based interface for editing widgets. Rest assured, if you don't want this, you can install the classic widgets plugin and it will disable this support. But I think this is a really cool feature. Legacy blocks work. So this is the stock WordPress widgets that come with your site. And you'll see these are all what are called legacy widgets. And so what that means is when I click into them, I have like the same form that I had before, but just on a different page. And you see I have to click out to edit it and to see those changes. But I can now use or add any blocks that I want here. So if I wanted to, let's say, add in a, I don't know, an image block, I can do that and pull something from my media library. Or if I wanted to add a block that is, let's say, a full-on media and text block, I could do that, where we have something from our media library and the full-on text. And essentially anything that you can do in the block editor, you can now make a widget out of, which is pretty cool. If you want, you can still add legacy widgets. So if you have a bunch of widgets in your site, almost all of them should work with a new widgets editor if they're following the proper APIs. And you can access them by searching for a legacy widget and then just selecting the widget that you want to display. The ones that, this is just a stock WordPress install. So the only widgets that will appear here are widgets that there isn't a block equivalent to. So Meta is one that doesn't have a, Meta is the one where you get all these links and things like that. Meta doesn't have an equivalent as a block, so it shows up there. Whoops. And navigation menu. The new navigation block isn't ready yet, so you'll get the legacy version of this as well. So if I wanted to have my primary menu in my footer, I could do that too. This is also available in the customizer interface. And this is one of the reasons why you might have heard about the blockified widget editor that was supposed to be coming originally to WordPress 5.6. One of the reasons that it didn't come out is because it didn't have support for inline editing and preview in the customizer. But now you do. So I can make changes here. And let's say just change this to on Peppa. And you'll see it gets automatically updated over here in the customizer preview. And this is essentially a fully embedded block editor, but just inside the sidebar of my, that looked weird, but just inside the sidebar of my site. So we could add arbitrary text here, and it'll appear over in the live preview for the site. Like I said, this will be turned on by default. It should work with the vast majority of widgets. This is, of course, like an entirely rebuilt editor, so it can only support widgets that did things like the right way. But most widgets that we've seen in testing do seem to work. But if you're concerned about it, you can install the classic widgets plugin, and it'll turn it back to the old interface. So one of the things you might have heard about is full site editing in WordPress. And that's this big goal for this year, where you should be able to edit any part of your site with the block editor and just use that full WYSIWYG interface to make changes, things like that. Essentially taking the block editor from a post experience out all the way to a site experience. What we get in this first version is a bunch of those blocks, and we get the ability to create templates. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how that works here. So let's go back to this Pablo Picasso post that I have here. What I have set up is a new block called a query block. So you can see query loop here. And this gives us a couple of different settings. This essentially allows you, it's kind of a more powerful version of the latest post block, if you remember that, where it lets you do a whole bunch of customization and essentially do whatever you want. So let me show you doing this from scratch. I think that'll be the best way to do this. So I'm going to search for the query block. And I'm going to get this really cool new preview UI, where essentially this is showing me different block patterns inside the editor. So instead of having to go to patterns and search for things, I can just add that block and WordPress will show me a selection of patterns that I can scroll through. If I want, I can also start from blank. Start from blank. This is start on my own. So I'll show you kind of how that works. Let's start with, I want the title and the excerpt. And so you can see it's now showing the title for this post, the excerpt for that post, and then another one, title for that post, the excerpt for that post. If I go up and select my query loop block, I can get some controls about what I want to show here. Where did that go? Is it in here? There is a control for this. I'm almost certain that lets me control how many of these I want to show up, but I'm not finding it. Live demos. Okay, I have no idea where that control went to. But there's some way to control that, but I think it defaults to showing the latest 3. But so this gets into a kind of like weird kind of editing mode. So you'll see this is a post excerpt block. This isn't like text that I can edit. It's pulling in the excerpt for this block. And I can make changes here for some things that will apply to all of these. So let's say read more about this piece. You'll see this is reflecting on all of these. So I'm making a change kind of like at a template level that is then getting reflected in each of these blocks. Let's say I want to take this and actually show the featured image as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to transform this into a column. We're going to select our columns block and add a second column. And then over here, we're going to add a post title block. And so you can see now that I have the post title on the right and the excerpt on the left. We can now get rid of this block. It's not really necessary. And let's say we actually want this to go the other way. So let's switch those. Oops. Column and move left. And then let's say we want to maybe align this in the middle. And then one right after it, we put the featured image. There we go. And so if I update this, you can see what it looks like on the front end. You can see the one that I created earlier, which we're going to kind of get into a little bit. I don't know why the image isn't showing up. That's a little bit weird. Yeah, beta software, maybe something for me to report. But it should be showing up there. I'm not sure why it's not. Strange. Well, count one bug so far for today. But yeah, you can do some kind of cool things like this. This is something I set up before, where the image is over here and the title of the post and the content of the post is shown over there. And so these are all pulled from, let's go over to the query, up to the query. These are pulled in from the post type of post. We're ordering them from newest to oldest. We're saying we're including sticky posts. And for here, I'm saying, show me all the posts that have the Picasso category. And And I did something a little bit cool here to show what you can do with the new post template editor. So if we look at this, this is a completely custom layout for just this post, where I've gotten rid of, I want to say this is the main focus of this piece. I've gotten rid of all the Chrome, the sidebar, the footer, the header, all of that stuff. And it's just a page that's dedicated to this particular piece where I've gotten rid of all the other stuff from my theme. And the way you do that is through this new feature called templates. So you can see we have a couple of templates here. By default, it'll say default template, but you can create your own and you can edit it. And so what happens when you click edit is you get dropped into the template editor. It's telling me that I'm editing this template. Changes made here will affect all posts and pages that use that template. And so I'm not going to go through exactly how I built this to try and keep this talk a bit quick. But what you'll see is that I have a group block that has its own background color. So it's overriding the background color of the page. And you can kind of see like where things are still kind of this being a preview of how full site editing could work. For instance, I can't change the background of this page here. At least I couldn't find out a way to. So I'm having to create a group block. And this looks a little bit weird in the editor that this green will show up from the original background, but it doesn't, as you can see here. So it's not a perfect one-to-one preview yet. And I use those same blocks that I did before. So I have here, this is the post title block. This is the post featured image block. This is the post content block. If we go over here, you can see this is the post content block. And I even pulled in things like, so this is the site title, and this is the actual site title. Like if I change this, for instance, to WordPress 5.8 and update my site, you'll see that I'm actually updating the title of my site right from this post editor. But that kind of gives you an idea of what you can do where I have this completely custom template that does the full layout for my WordPress page here. And I can use these in different posts. So for instance, if I wanted to, I could say, this post here, let's also select this one to use that same template. And if we go back, we can now see that this is using that template as well. Whereas previously, we just set this back to default template, it'll show a regular WordPress page. And so I think there's some really cool things that you could explore with this. I'm not a designer, so these are just some things that I kind of threw together to show how that might work. But I think it should hopefully give you an idea of the kind of power that this has opened up to you as just a regular user without needing to write any code or anything like that. There's one more thing that I wanted to touch on that I think is really cool, which is the WordPress patterns directory. So this is a directory that exists on WordPress.org and automatically gets pulled into your block editor instance that fetches patterns that anyone can submit. And so like previously, if you've used the patterns in WordPress, you'd see that there's really only a couple of them for each of these. But now we have, well, no, it doesn't have a lot. But you can see we have more rich options available. Some of these aren't loading for me. But yeah, you can see things like this that are, as far as I know, these are all getting pulled from the WordPress patterns directory, which is launching with 5.8. So we could go over here and let's say we want this pattern, this image and quote on background. You get this like embedded instance of the block here that you can kind of explore. You can see how it works on different sizes. This is just like this whole patterns directory is still a work in progress. They'll be ready when 5.8 releases. But this kind of gives you an idea of how it could work. I think if I copy a pattern, this should work. Yeah. So it's copied the pattern to my clipboard. And now if we wanted to insert this into a new page, I can just paste that in there and it's brought that pattern into my site editor. But again, the idea is that this is something that will be fetched and show up automatically when you're using WordPress. So you're not going to need to necessarily be going over into WordPress.org/patterns and searching for something and copying them. As you search, you should be able to find all of them. Here's another really cool one. But if you want to, I think for now you can do it this way. But yeah, you can see this really crazy image. It's pulled in the image for me and all that kind of stuff. I think this is going to be really, really exciting. One of the problems is that patterns have been shipped with WordPress. So when new releases come out, you could add patterns that way. But that would mean like for 3 or 4 or 5 months, the patterns that you would have available to you would just be the same. Whereas now, as new patterns get published in the pattern directory, you'll be able to use them like immediately, which I think is really cool. Yeah, I think those are all the things that I wanted to touch on for changes in WordPress 5.8. As always, this was a kind of a quick preview. If you go to make.wordpress.org/core, you can find the details about all these things as they come out and all the changes in WordPress. Let me find you a great host example of this. So like this is what's new in Gutenberg 10.8. So if you want to be in the know about what's coming up with WordPress, what's coming up with Gutenberg, this is a great place to check out make.wordpress.org. But yeah, that's everything that I wanted to share. So I guess we can open it up to any questions.
Yeah, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat. Keep your mics muted so we don't fight over each other, and I'll ask the questions to Tim. So far, we have one from Jack. He just wants to know about I think he wants to know about the SEO benefits of the PDF embed. Does it actually improve the visibility to Google?
So this is just a JavaScript powered embed. So it's not like copying the text of the PDF and making it available to the page. To like specific SEO questions, I wouldn't be the best person to ask. I would assume that Google can index PDFs, but it might not. But yeah, no, it's not like copying any part of the PDF into the content. It's just, let's see if I can show this to you, what like the actual code looks like. Oh, I made it a reusable block, so there's even less there. But let's actually go to this page. And if we look at the source, like, yeah, so this is just like an object. It's not pulling in any text. It's all opaque.
Got it. Awesome. Larry Parks is in awe of the speed of your development site. Why is this so fast?
It shouldn't be. This is the development site that we use at iThemes for testing things. It's actually meant to be a kind of slow site in terms of like the hosting server that's powering this is very weak. But I guess I can use this time to tell you a secret. WordPress out of the box is extraordinarily fast with Gutenberg and default stuff. It's when you start adding very big chunky plugins that things slow down. So Gutenberg out of the box is amazingly quick. So there's nothing nothing special about it. It's actually, I think this site doesn't even use SSDs. It uses old spinning disks and things like that. But this is just kind of like what you get from WordPress when you leave it out of the box and you don't load it up on plugins.
Nice. Wailing is asking, I'm guessing it does, but does the copy and paste also works for basic blog posts, not just pages, right?
Yeah, you can paste this stuff into anything you want. So let's copy this pattern. I think I might be mistaken with the block directory. So yeah, you can see this, publish this, and let's view it on the front end of our site. But yeah, this isn't a blog post. As I'm remembering this, actually, I believe the pattern directory has core patterns and has user submitted patterns. And so I think actually that what you'll see by default in the Gutenberg editor in your site, they're pulling those patterns from WordPress.org over an API, but it's restricting it, I think, to just a certain list of patterns, at least for now. So if you want like the full breadth of things, you'd have to go here. I think that's right. And it's just the core patterns that are being pulled over dynamically. But if you look at your WordPress install in 5.8, you won't see like code for this columns pattern, as far as I know. It's all fetching it over the API.
Awesome. That site is seriously lightning fast. Right. Okay. So Amy Lesson's asking.
It's as slow as possible.
She's asking a good question. I've heard this before. I'm just curious. We're just curious about your opinion. But as she writes, a lot of folks are trying not to panic about how they'll prevent their clients from wrecking templates or accidentally or intentionally dipping into the template editor, right? Like
Yeah.
making titles bright red and increasing font sizes and things like that. Any ideas? Any advice? What are you thinking?
So I'd say two things. Keep in mind for 5.8, this is just for templates. It's not like the full site editing experience. But this template editor does have permission checks on it. And those permission checks by default go to edit theme options. So if you're already restricting your client, which is the way I typically advise setting this up, is to create a specific user for your client that has permissions to edit things and so on and so forth, but takes away things like managing themes. And so remove the edit theme options, remove the ability to install and delete plugins, that kind of stuff. You can do that like with the user role editor plugin and things like that. And so if you do that, you'll get that same effect here. Out of the box, you need support to edit theme options to be able to edit templates. It's also set up in a way such that you can modify that even further. So if, I don't know about like today, right now, this minute, but I imagine your favorite plugins that you use for like locking down the WordPress admin for clients should get new features to do that as well. So maybe you want to give them access to the customizer, but you don't want to give them access to editing templates. You'll be able to do that. The code inside of WordPress is flexible enough to make that happen. I think in an ideal world in the future, you would be able to lock parts of like the site editor and template editor down, but leave other parts available. But at this point in time, it's just at the granularity level of saying, okay, no editing templates or no creating new templates, things like that.
Great. I have a question. If you have a code-based template and a UI template that has the same name, who wins? How does that work?
I don't think there should be. Let me check something. Like I think those are distinct features. Let's see. I guess it's now hiding it. But yeah, like as far as I know, those are kind of like distinct features. What this is actually doing is this is like overriding the whole WordPress like template loading and things like that. So what they would have here would override it. But the template name here, I don't think those should conflict. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I don't think they should conflict. Like if someone names this template exactly my dash whatever dash whatever dash dot php, I don't think that should conflict. I don't even think they'd probably be able to name it that way. We could try, but I don't think this site has any template files that we could mess around with. Let's see.
That's a 404 page.
Yeah, I don't think 2021 comes with any templates that we could try this out and see to break it. But I don't think they should conflict. When full site editing comes, I think it's a little bit different. Like you could create a single .php essentially template, and that will override the default single .php. And I think like the UX around how that works is one of the things that needs to be solved before 5.9. But right now with just like page templates, I don't think they'll conflict. I think just essentially whatever they select for the post will be that. But like if you have something that is selecting a regular page template, it shouldn't suddenly start overriding that because they named it something funny. I don't think so.
So if the theme comes with a code-based page template named full width, would that show up in the dropdown? And would I be able to change it?
Let's see if we can find that out. That's a good way to do this.
So I create a quick page template file and add it to the window.
Yeah, that's That's exactly what I'm going to do. Let's see what happens. So you're going to have to excuse the sound of my typing. Let's see. Themes 20. And now I'm going to do something you should never do, which is edit a template or edit a theme without creating a child theme. But what do we want to use as the base? Okay, let's template name, full width. Okay, so let's see if that worked. Okay.
There really was one in full width. Okay.
Yeah, so both are showing. And so if we view this, I'm getting custom template, and let's see what happens when we select the other one. And then, yeah, this is the one that I defined in code. So yeah, it'll just show up with the same name, but it's not going to start overwriting stuff and things like that.
Interesting. Thank you. Oh, Wailing had one more question. He wants to know where the footer widget is in a new version.
What do you mean by footer widget? Yeah, I just made a template, an edit to the template to show. Okay. Yeah, I added hi. But yeah, so it won't conflict. It'll just show up. It would probably be a bad idea to name it the same thing, but it shouldn't start breaking things.
Yeah, Wailing, what did you mean by the footer widget? Sorry, I didn't ask that. I didn't get the clarification on that. You mean the footer like widget area? I'm guessing that's what he. I think he's talking about the widget area. That's it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this is 2021. So the widget area for 2021 shows up in the bottom in the footer. So these are all those widgets that I'm editing here. Does that answer your question?
Where do you see the widget areas? Where do you?
So they show up here. So 2021 only has one widget area. Okay. So we're just seeing this. So we have footer, and then we have the inactive widgets area. We could change themes. Let's try and find a theme that has multiple widget areas for you. But yeah, so footer number 1 and footer number 2. So you can see we now have 2 widget areas, and we could move our menu widget from this one to this one. And now if we go to our page, you can see we have our first menu, our first sidebar widget area, and our second widget area. And that's just footer number 1 and footer number 2.
Great. All right, last call for questions. Any other questions? Any other questions on WordPress 5.8 for Timothy? All right. I think that's it. Tim?
Awesome.
As always, thank you again for the WordPress preview.